You're probably already familiar with the major and minor pentatonic scale. Maybe you know the 5 shapes, those 5 positions. Maybe you know the fact that they're actually the same scale, they just start and end on different notes depending on whether it's major or minor. Maybe you know how flexible they are, the fact that you can use them in all kinds of different musical situations, and then there are some that you can't. But there's one thing about these scales that you cannot learn through diagrams and drills. And the insight I'm talking about requires us tearing the scale down to its sonic DNA. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today we will learn how to phrase the pentatonic scales. Now, it's largely agreed upon that the major and minor pentatonic scales are pretty formative shapes for musicians in general. But as guitar players, we can sort of get stuck in the patterns that are generated by these scales on the fretboard. And in doing so, we sort of miss out on the insight into how the scales actually sound, what sounds the scales create. And it's inside those sounds where the music really is. The music isn't in the patterns. It's in these relationships, in these sonic relationships inside the scale. New ideas and new things to learn can be a little challenging for the self-educating guitar player. Is this important? Is this something I should be learning? I help guitar players through that kind of thing all the time, and I do it in my online guitar academy called The Studio. The Studio is an online community platform that also features rich educational content. There are dozens and dozens of curated lessons. I teach deep dive online workshops. I host live QA events, and I even host live guided practice sessions. Guitarists in The Studio can post their progress on whatever they're working on and get direct feedback from me. Now, I know that the idea of an online guitar academy might not be for everybody. That's why I offer a 7-day free trial, so you can head on in there, take a look, right? You get access to everything. You can take a look at all those lessons, maybe even finish a course or make a friend or two. If you decide it's not for you, I totally understand. If you do decide to stick around, I look forward to working with you. Pentatonic scales are 5-note scales. Now, you can make a lot of different scales with just 5 notes, but the 2 primary ones that we learn early on are the major and the minor pentatonic scale. And in fact, the minor pentatonic scale, most of us learn really early on for good reason. It's a very flexible structure. You can use the minor pentatonic scale in a lot of different musical situations. But really understanding these scales, how to make music with them, requires that we understand them sonically. Not just how to play them on the fretboard, but how they sound, and how each one of the notes inside the scale relates back to the scale itself. The best method to get to know the scales in this way is to boil them down to their structure, right? What those notes are, and then listen to the scale very thoughtfully from that perspective. Now, if this seems like an unorthodox or unusual way to think about scales, I think you might be in for a treat, because this is where all the musicality lies. Let's zoom in, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so this is going to be a unique approach to playing the pentatonic scale. Very different from just playing patterns, which is great to get, capability, to get technical capability, but not necessarily great to learn how to phrase this scale, right? That kind of a drill is not going to help me understand how to really pull some music out of this scale. The very first thing we're going to do is just look at the formulas for these 2 scales, the major and the minor pentatonic scale. We're going to be working in A today, so we're going to be using the A major pentatonic and the A minor pentatonic. The first thing we're going to do is just look at these formulas. Now, if you don't know anything about scale formulas or all these numbers are derived from the major scale, and as a musician, we owe it to ourselves to just become familiar with that structure. Because it is the language of this instrument. This instrument is designed to play music. Music is coordinated and talked about with that language, these numbers in this context. So, the major pentatonic scale, and we're playing A here, contains the root, the 2nd note, the 3rd note, the 5th note, and the 6th note of a major scale. And then we're back to the root again. Root, 2, 3, 5, 6, root. Right? Now, I just want you to notice something. Inside the scale formula, the root, the 3rd, and the 5th are the notes that we build a major chord with. So every single major chord we build, no matter what it is the root, the third, and the fifth of that scale that we name the chord after. So a C major chord would be the root, the third, and the fifth of the C major scale. Here we are in A. The scale contains a major triad in it, and in fact, this triad is 3/5 of the scale. In other words, the triad itself, the chord, is the majority, contains the majority of notes in the scale. Right, it is 3/5 of the scale. It's going to come in handy later on. Root, 2, 3, 5, 6. That's our major. Now we're going to stay in A, but we're going to change to minor. The minor pentatonic scale is the root, the flat 3, the 4, the 5, and the flat 7. Root, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. Now you'll notice, or let me bring your attention to the fact that this scale also has the root, the flat 3, and the 5th in it, and that makes up a minor triad. And again, this is 3/5 of the scale. There are only 2 other notes that we need to complete this and make this into a scale. Right? So in both instances, inside the major and inside the minor pentatonic scales, there is a major triad and a minor triad. The corresponding triads are inside that scale and in fact make up the majority of the scale. Okay, now armed with that information, we're going to get to the meat of this idea, which is just connecting ourselves to the sonic DNA of the scale, right? Why the scale sounds the way it does. And we're going to do this with the A major pentatonic scale first. I'm going to put that formula here on the bottom. And we're going to do it like this. We're going to play this tonic, the root of the scale, and we're going to play all of the other notes against the tonic, and we're just going to listen for one thing. Is the note we're hearing against that root, is it stable or is it unstable? Is it more or less stable than the other notes, or than the tonic, than the root of the scale? And we're going to do it backwards. We're going to start at the root and we're going to go backwards. And the reason we're going to go backwards is just to keep our brain engaged so we don't fall asleep and end up going like this. Right? That's great for technique, but it does nothing for us attaching to the musicality of the scale itself. Okay, here we go. Root. The first note on the top of the scale is also the root. Stable. It's the same note. Right? It's the epitome of stability, really. Very, very grounded. The next note in the scale, right, coming backwards from the top, is the 6. Now listen, I'm going to play this note. Is it more stable or less stable? That sounds unfinished to me. Sounds unfinished compared to the root, right? So I'd say stable, unstable, right? This feels undone, incomplete, right? Okay, root, stable, 6, unstable. Let's go to the 5. That sounds really stable to me, right? Much more so than the 6. And in fact, the 6, when I move from the 6 to the 5, that sounds pretty nice, right? That's a release of tension. And I can take the 6 up to the root. That's a release of tension as well. Already, I'm listening to this and I'm seeing this 6 as a pivot point, as a place to generate tension that I can then control and release out. Right? 6, root, 5. Listen when I take a little phrase and I end it on the 6. Right? It really calls for some stability. 6, unstable. Okay, we're down to the 5. The next note in the scale, right, moving down, is the 3rd. That's pretty stable, right? Sounds really stable to me. Maybe not as stable as the fifth. Listen to this. But pretty stable, right? Notice that the stable notes are the root, the third, and the fifth. That's our triad. These are the most stable notes so far in the scale. Right? That 6 is unstable. 5, 3, and root are stable. One more note in our scale, and that is the 2. I think we're going to find that this is going to be less stable. Right? Sounds like that there's less stability in the 2, more stability in the 3. And I think we can also experiment with the 2 going down to the root. Right? So now I've got another sort of melodic structure here. I can generate tension and resolve that tension with stability. Root stable, 2 unstable. 3 stable, right? So check this out. Right, that 2 is less stable than the notes around it, the 1 or the 3. I have another melodic structure, right? Another place where I can generate and resolve tension. One more thing about this that I think we should note, and that is that the 2 most unstable notes, the 2 and the 6, are the only other notes in there besides the major triad, right? But they are also the notes that are right next to the root. The 6 is below the root, and the 2 is right above the root. Each one of those notes, the 2 and the 6, both pull towards some note in the triad and most specifically towards the root. They resolve to the other notes of the triad perfectly fine. But they both resolve to the root. Right? Just something to notice. Now we're starting to understand how this scale works, right? And now when we play it, we can just think about that and hear it and get connected to how it feels to generate and move those sounds around, right? How does it feel in our hands and our ears combined at the same time to do something like this? That tension around. I'm controlling the sonic DNA of this scale by understanding where these stabilities are. What's more stable, right? Where can I land? What's less stable? Where can I generate that tension? Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the minor pentatonic scale. Start at the top, root. We're just looking for stability and instability. Root, pretty stable. We already found this out in the last scale, right? It's the same note, super stable. Next note down in the minor pentatonic scale is the flat 7. Well, I'm pretty sure that's less stable. Much less stable than the root. Right? Let's go down to the next note. The next note in the scale here is the 5th. We already learned this from the major pentatonic scale. The 5th is really stable against the root, right? This minor 7, this flat 7, feels like it wants to move to the root or the flat 7. Right? If I end a little phrase on that flat 7, wants to go to the root or down to that 5th, right? So we've got stable, flat 7, unstable, 5, stable. Here comes the next note in the scale, that's the 4. That sounds unstable to me. sounds like it's not finished yet. Let's listen to that going to the 5. There we go. Instability to stability. Next note in the scale is the 3rd. It's the flat 3 here. That actually sounds less stable than the major 3rd did. Sounds like that is less stable, and it sounds like it wants to go down to the root. It'll sound good going up to the 4, but the 4 is unstable. That minor 3rd really feels good going all the way down to the root. Right? So, stable, root stable, flat 7, unstable, 5 stable, 4 unstable, not as bad as the flat 7, but feels unfinished. That's really unstable. And that wants to go back down to the root. So now I've got a little map of stability and instability, right? I'm just moving through these notes. Unstable, instability, instability, super instability, right? That root becomes sort of the most stable place. But now I've got this little tone map, right? This little place where I can start to move through the scale using my ears and my hands and feeling what it sounds like. That phrase is really important. Can you feel what it sounds like? There's the flat 7 here. And again, the most tense notes, that flat 7 and the flat 3 are the ones right next to the root. Here's the root. The next note in the scale up is the flat 3. That has a lot of instability, and that flat 7. Right? So in this scale, the most unstable notes are the flat 7, which pulls to the root, and the flat 3, which also naturally pulls down to the root. Now I've got these tonal maps, these maps of the formula of the scale, where I can start to hear and feel what it sounds like to generate tension and release tension, right? Where are the most tense spots in the scale? Where are the most resolved spots in the scale? This is going to start, I promise you, if you do this a little bit, even just a little bit, you will begin to phrase. Your ears and your hands will learn what it means to create and dump out tension, right? Create tension and resolve tension, and you will not tolerate mindless playing anymore. You won't be able to. You will have trained your ears to do better than this. Right? You will have trained your ears to do much better. Right? You will no longer tolerate mindless playing. You'll begin to start phrasing musically right away. Getting these relationships, how these notes move back and forth in our ears and under our fingers, attaches us to the sounds that the scale makes, and that's when we can start phrasing these scales musically. Tabs for this lesson are available on my Patreon page, as always. I hope this lesson has been informative. I hope it's been accessible for you and given you a little bit of insight into the pentatonic scale and how to really start phrasing them musically rather than just seeing them as patterns. As always, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.